Hi, Sandra here from Create in Spain, and today I wanted to show you something that I bought in the shops today. I had to go into town and do a few bits of paperwork, and so while I was there I decided just to wander around a couple of shops. One of them was a Chinese shop that I hadn't been into for a long while, and the other one was in fact not a shop but the street market, so more on that a bit later. Anyway, I came out with some of these. And yes, I know, these are the sorts of things that Granny might have used many, many years ago. Only she'd have probably had the fabric variety. The interesting thing with these is that they are plastic. Aha! So, no, I don't intend to use these on tables and things. Not my style at all. But I thought they might come in very handy for a couple of other things. And so I picked up a couple of different designs. Now these didn't cost me very much at all. We are talking cents here for each one. And I'm thinking to myself, and my mind is doing its overtime thing. So the first thing that I was thinking about these, and I haven't tried it yet because I don't have a project to use it on, but I am thinking that this could be great if you're doing decorating of wedding cakes and you want to use lace matte stencils. Now, I tried it out on a little piece of card using a texture paste. And the reason I did that is because texture paste is very similar in texture before it dries to royal icing that you would use with a stencil on a cake, and this is the result. I had to use it on this sort of photographic type paper because my other papers soak up moisture from it and they don't do stenciling with texture paste very well at all. So hopefully you can still see, even though it is a patterned paper, you can still see the effect that I've been getting with it. So I think that definitely has possibilities. And I will probably try that out at some stage when I next do a decorative cake and I want to have an experiment. However, for my normal craft activities, I'm thinking to myself that this would be quite good for doing very decorative stenciling on cards. And the first thing I decided to try out was in fact using my airbrush through it. And that works pretty well. What doesn't work very well, because of the thickness of this and the variety of the depth of the plastic, are these things. The sponge Daubrey type blending tool type things. Those do not do the job very well at all. In fact, I've got a little sample here on some scrap card and that's all I got out of it. So that was not great. However, using an airbrush was a different kettle of fish altogether. Now excuse the blob there, I did that when I was cleaning out my airbrush. I was silly, I hadn't moved things out of the way before I did that. Slap on my wrist, hey. But you can see that you get this very sort of fine, linen-y sort of look in between the larger patterns. So that could be an interesting thing to do. But even more interesting was putting it through my embossing machine. Now, even with a very, very gentle pressure, it embosses this silver foil card, mirror card, very well indeed. So I decided to give it a shot on heavy watercolour. Now this is a £300 watercolour card. Don't know if you can see too well, but it embossed it rather nicely. On this side, I just used my airbrush, and then what I did was I turned the card up the other way, put the same piece on the back, and then put it through the embossing machine. And you can see that it does a very, very good job of embossing patterns. So that's really interesting because this stuff was cheap. Now, sometimes you get, these are really fancy because they're gold and silver painted, not plated. That would be fun, wouldn't it? No, they're painted in gold and silver. But quite often you can find these that are just plain white paper or whatever. But the paper isn't really thick enough generally to do any embossing. But if you find these versions in the plain white or cream or whatever it is, plastic, and you fancy giving it a go, I am sure that will work brilliantly and you needn't bother with going the whole hog fancy. But I'm thinking this would be great to break up into portions so that I can use individual pieces to do various things. For example, this one's got individual flowers and a few individual leaves. The centre did have a whole flower, but I've cut that in half. But you have these curved flower borders, which would be rather nice, and these. The other thing that occurred to me is that if you put this under a scanner, you could probably get a cut file from it, and you could probably manage to cut the edge pretty accurately. So if you did want to do this, you could actually cut your edge first on your cutting machine and then do the embossing afterwards with the same piece. So that I think has got definite possibilities and should be quite interesting. This one is a completely different design, and again you've got different elements. This piece would be quite good in the centre of a card because you'd get part of it in and not cover the entire card. We've got these pieces here which would do quite nicely, and this border here would look great for card edging. And on this one, this would do great for the centre cards. I've also got butterflies here, sort of tulipy type flowers, little flowers, and again we have border. And obviously with a border you can cut it to the length that you require it and just use it as you wish, whether it's across a card or down the side of a card or whatever. So yeah, I think that's definitely got possibilities, and I'm looking forward to playing with those a bit more. But this is actually powdered eyeshadow, but it has a lot of mica in it. And these only cost me €2 each. Now, in order for me to actually buy much mica, it would cost me quite a lot of money, and I'd have to order it online and I'd have to wait for it, etc, etc. But you know, €2 each, yeah, I can cope with that. What I didn't realise is that they have these nifty little brushes, quite sweet if you're actually going to use it for makeup, which of course I'm not. But they have these little brushes built in with a dipping pot, so you keep it closed, you shake and tap or whatever, and your brush gets loaded with just enough colour to do your eyes or whatever it is you're going to do. So very sweet, but it does have a substantial amount of mica, and I did do a little test swatch, and I've lost it somewhere. I did a little test swatch of what it actually looks like. Now with this, I mixed some just with some varnish just to see what would happen. And as you can see, it's pretty shiny stuff. And that one I think was just with glycerin, if I remember correctly. But again, it does have a considerable amount of shine. Now the colours I have here are baby blue. It is NYC New York Colour Sparkle Eye Dust, made in China, of course. And this one is Opal Sparkle. So I have two different colours, and what I intend to do is to see if I can get hubby to break these containers open so I can decant them. I thought this probably would be just a plastic insert that popped out, but it's not. So I'm going to have to break the container to get the contents out, because at the moment it's not brilliant. If I want to actually do something with it, it's going to take a reasonable amount. I'll have to shake it upside down for a while. So I will probably decant it. I have some small jars I could use, but that depends whether I can find a way, or hubby can find a way to open it without the powder going everywhere, because obviously he can't use things like Dremels and whatever on it. That would be absolutely disastrous. that does not bear thinking about. But anyway, they are pretty well micaed powders and relatively cheap. And so you can use those in any application where you wouldn't normally use micas. Now the great thing about them is they are already loose powders rather than palettes which you have to dig out and try and crush and so on and so forth. So that's really good. And they are very fine. You might be able to see a trace of it on my skin here, I don't know, but if you can't, I will do a little test. Excuse the state of my fingers, I've been playing with ink. But I'll do a little test on the back of my hand. And you may or may not be able to see that. It's quite shiny. It is quite shiny indeed. I can certainly see it in the light I've got in here, daylight. It's very, very shiny. And looks quite pinky actually. It's really strange because it varies according to the direction that you look upon it. But this is supposed to be opal. And this one is supposed to be blue. Put that one on the back of, oh, hang on, need a bit more. This one is supposed to be blue, so I'll put it on the back of my other hand. Don't know if you can actually see that. That is actually a gentler colour. For some strange reason, that doesn't seem to have much colour to it. It's got shine and sparkle, but it looks more like white than blue. So that's really weird because it looks darker in the tub. I thought when I picked it up it was actually silver, but it is supposed to be a blue. But this one is definitely quite coloured. This one is more subtle. Maybe I just don't have much on here, which is a possibility. Let's just give that another. It's not getting much on the brush here. Maybe it's a bit stuck in the bottle. So there we go. But it should be interesting if I can actually get it out of there to use out of a normal tub. So that's it. That was my purchase, or my purchases for today. Hope you find that interesting, and maybe it just, you know, makes you think of something that you've seen in your local shops. Or if you happen to be coming on holiday to Spain, have a look around the Chinese shops and the markets and see what you can find that you wouldn't expect to use in a craft room. Take care now. Bye bye.